Hello and welcome to my FlossTube channel. I'm Jean Farish and I am here to chat with you about cross-stitch and other related stuff. And I want to start with a footnote to the last week when I mentioned how to find out about stitch gatherings or how to get one started. And I have a couple comments to share with you from other viewers. One came from Mindy. And you may remember that Mindy was actually one of my co-hosts on a FlossTube episode many, many moons ago. Anyway, same Mindy. And what she had to say is, think of these stitch gatherings as almost like a little mini retreat. It's a chance for the more experienced stitchers in the group to maybe help a newbie, and even people that are very experienced sometimes run into a new problem or a new situation and just kind of need some feedback. And so it kind of offers that opportunity, as well as being a time that's just, it's me time. We all need to make sure that we have me time in our busy weeks. And I think Stitch Gatherings fills that bill for a lot of people. So she had that to say. And then Maureen mentioned not to overlook local libraries. Sometimes they have meetups for just all kinds of handwork. So check with your local library and see if they have something that's just already on the books that you can join. So those are two good suggestions that came from viewers. And I hope that people will continue giving some input about their firsthand experiences. Now, tomorrow we have one, well, I shouldn't say tomorrow, you're probably watching this on Saturday. I'm hoping to go to one that's local to me this weekend. And I when I first looked at it, I thought, I can't be there for the whole time. And then I thought, well, why not go for, even if it's just an hour? It's better than not going at all. And it's a way of supporting the organizer and letting her know that, that's a good idea. So I think sometimes we kind of just have to shake off the lethargy and all the reasons why we can't do something and ask ourselves, can we just do part of it if we can't do the whole thing? And maybe that's true of a lot of things in life, not just stitch gatherings. So just keep that thought in the back of your mind. Now, this weekend is my first experience with a virtual trade show. And, you read all kinds of things as you're aging about how to keep your mind sharp and how just to kind of just really keep it together as you're aging. And one of them is about learning new things. So that has certainly been my experience. It's been a great experience because the organizers have been extremely helpful and produced a whole series of tutorials to help those that are sometimes technologically challenged, like myself, to figure out what we need to do to create our booth, create our shopping cart, all kinds of things. And so today was the first day, and I have really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the whole weekend. So it actually lasts until Monday afternoon. So, yeah, and then that brings me to my promise last week to show you the other things that I'm releasing for public consumption. That's probably not the best phraseology here. These are all but two of those designs that I showed last week are already in my Etsy store, and everything that I'm about to show you now is in my Etsy store. It's a PDF format. If you want a printed version, I encourage you to shop locally and check with one of the many companies that have online shopping where you'll be able to get it. But if you truly want a PDF, then my Etsy store is the only place you're going to get that. So next week, the two newest designs, which is the egret and the dolphin, and the Blackbird and the Guernsey Cow I will have as PDFs in my Etsy store. So here are the 5 other things that you will now find in your local needlework store or your favorite online retailer. First up is literally my oldest publication. This is the Jannet Irving sampler, and I first charted it and sold it in 1981. Now, Jannet Irving married into the Farish family and emigrated from Scotland to New Jersey. And so Jannet Irving is actually the great, I have to count on my fingers, great-great-great-grandmother to my 2 daughters. So I knew a little bit about her history, and that's how I had access to her original sampler. But family folklore had her year of birth wrong. And so when I was able to access the records in the Scottish data bank, I found out she was actually born 10 years earlier than I had been told. Because originally I thought she was 17 years old when she stitched the sampler. So when I published it in 1981, that's what I said. And of course, subsequently learned that that was kind of old for somebody to be stitching a sampler. So once I was able to access the birth records, I found out that she was 7 years old at the time that she finished the sampler. But hold on a minute. She finished it in May, and her birthday wasn't until September. So she was actually 6 years old when she stitched the original sampler. Now this one is doesn't have any over 1 work. It's cross stitch, Algerian eyelet, little bit of one line of backstitch, and a 4-sided stitch alphabet. I have diagrams in the instructions, so if you're new to specialty stitches, I think you'll be able to manage it. But if not, there are cross-stitch alternatives. And the interesting thing is about Jannet is that this sampler can be stitched on Aida as well as linen and even weave fabrics. So keep that in mind. So that's Jannet. Jane Hattersley is my other antique sampler reproduction. And this one is all cross-stitch, so it can be done on any counted thread fabric. And I actually have 3 different colorways in the publication. The one that matches the surface colors, the ones that I came up with thinking, let's just soften this up a little bit. And then later on, when I was reframing it, which I showed in an earlier FlossTube channel episode, I was able to see the colors on the back. And so I then came up with a color code that matched the colors that were not faded. So that's Jane. And then I have these 2 circular samplers, When Hearts Come Home for Christmas and Peace on Earth. They both use the same color scheme. So once you get the colors for Hearts Come Home at Christmas, you have all the colors you'll need for Peace on Earth. And also, at no extra charge, there is a whole series of videos that go with When Hearts Come Home for Christmas that if you are new to stitching on linen is a good way to just kind of have company on that journey. And I can show you some tips and some pitfalls to avoid and that kind of stuff. And then the last one is Roxie. Now, Roxie is what I call the reimagined sampler. This one also was originally a mystery sampler stitch-along, and I did a whole series of videos to go along with that. So if you purchase that chart, you'll have access to 6 very, very detailed video instructions. Now, this one is charted for linen and even weave. Because of the nature of some of the stitches, I don't recommend trying it on Aida. And I call it the reimagined sampler because the original Roxana Corson was very, very just olive greens and golds and just not very colorful. And one of the other things too about Roxie is that it doesn't have. I skipped the over one stitching, which is part of the original Roxana Corson. And in recharting it, I made sure that the proportions would fit in an 18, not a 16 by 20 standard frame. Now that depends on the fabric count that you choose. But if you are stitching on a 14 count, 15, 16 count, it will fit in that frame very nicely. So those are the things that are going to be available in, I hope, lots and lots of cross-stitch shops across the nation, and some good online retailers as well. Actually, speaking of when hearts come home for Christmas, I got the sweetest note in my Etsy store. This was from a woman named Susan, and she said, "I wanted to share with you my finished and framed Hearts Come Home at Christmas. I gifted it to my brother for his 70th birthday. He lives in our family home, and we gather there yearly. I am now starting Peace on Earth, and I thank you for your lovely creative vision." So then I wrote back and responded to that and asked her permission to share her note and this photo here on my Etsy, not my Etsy channel. What am I talking about? My FlossTube channel. And so this was her response. She said, "My brother loves Christmas like we love our stitching. He was going to hang it for a bit and then save it for Christmas. He loves it so much that I think it has a permanent home. So yes, please share. It's the first piece I have stitched that I had framed." So I just love stories like that. It just, I like feeling connected to the stitchers. And so when you take the time to send me a note like that, I just can't tell you how much it warms my heart. It doesn't matter that I've been doing this for over 40 years. Every time is like a new experience. And I just love hearing from stitchers, and especially those who take the time, like I said, to let me know what it means to them in their own journey. I guess this next thing sort of falls under the heading of an FAQ, but it wasn't a question left here on my channel. Instead, it was a question in a Facebook group that the person posted and said they were very confused about what to call various fabrics, and they threw out a whole lot of terms, and it really was a mishmash of some of them were fabric names, some of them were manufacturer names, some of them were distributor names. And so I responded to it. And then later, fortunately, I made a copy of it because my response was pretty detailed and lengthy. And I said that I was lucky that I made a copy of it, because later on I went back and my comment was gone. I don't know why, but it wasn't there. But this is what I had to say. First of all, I understand any confusion about fabric names because they're all over the place. So I kind of broke it down, and I said, let's start with manufacturers. These are the companies that actually own the mills, that they get the raw material, they get the cotton, they get the linen threads, and they actually weave and dye the fabric. So those are your manufacturers. And so Zweigert is probably the most well-known fabric manufacturer among the American market. Now, there are a lot of mills that make linen and Aida and the even weaves. Most of those mills are names that as a consumer you have never heard of, and you really don't need to know them because their name doesn't appear anywhere on the packaging even. So that's the first thing is you've got the category of a manufacturer. Next, you've got importers. These are the companies that buy the fabric from Zweigert, buy the fabric from these lesser known, not lesser quality, but lesser known factories, mills that produce the linen, Aida, and even weaves. And the names that you would probably be familiar with here would be like Witchelt, Yarn Tree, Access Commodities. Their kind of in-house name for their line of linens is Legacy Linens. Okay, so and there, see, already I digress. So those are your importers. They don't make the linen or the even weave or the Aida. They buy it directly from the mill. Okay, then you've got your overdyers. Now, depending on their size, they might buy it directly from the mill, or they might buy it from one of those wholesalers. So these are the companies that take the already manufactured linen, Aida, or even weave and add their own special touch to it, whether mostly dyeing, but also some printing. So again, they didn't make the linen, they didn't dye it originally, but they are over dyeing it. They are taking something that's been previously processed and adding a dye or some kind of printing technique to it. So there's a long list of companies I could mention here, but the ones that pop into my mind are Atomic Ranch, Fox and Rabbit, R&R, and I'm sure you've got your favorites. So, and they range from small batch overdyers to those that just do, huge amounts. So, so you've got your manufacturer, your importer, your overdyer. And then the other thing too that was kind of again in this mashup from this original post that I was looking at is the question of fiber content. Now I've mentioned this before, but if somebody sells you a piece of linen fabric, it needs to come from the flax plant. If it's a blend, they need to be saying that, because if they say it's 100% linen, it's 100% from the flax plant. And then cotton is the other most common fiber that you're going to use, most notably in Aida. It is also some even weaves, but you won't find a cotton linen. There's no such thing. So that's also part of it. And then you have kind of, let's call them the brand names. Like when a company manufactures something and they call it Jobelin, that's like their brand name. And then another company has a even weave fabric that frankly is very similar, and they call it Lugana. They come from two different manufacturers. So it's sort of like, think about something like going down the cereal aisle. You can find cornflakes that are Kellogg's cornflakes and the store brand cornflakes. But if you find something like Cocoa Puffs, then there's only one company that makes Cocoa Puffs. And anybody else calls it something else. So that's where some of the fabric names like Aida have become so commonplace, they're like the cornflakes. And others are specific to a manufacturer like a Jobelin or a Lugana. So I hope this clarifies a little bit about what we call this fabric that we all stitch on. And yeah, I can see why a beginner would be very, very confused, because when you ask somebody what they're stitching on, the answer could be the count. Is it the thread count? Is it the stitch count? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the fabric type? Is it from the overdyer? So all these things can have a bearing on the answer you get when you ask somebody, what fabric are you stitching on? And before I sign off, I just want to remind you I'm going to be at the Stitchin Kitten in November. Meet and greet on the 8th, class on the 9th, and there is pre-stitching involved, so you need to get in touch with the Stitchin Kitten and get signed up so you can get the kit. I will be sending those out to the Stitchin Kitten next week, so they'll have them sooner rather than later. And I am on a roll here. 2 videos in 2 weeks. I hope I can keep this up. And so with that in mind, with that optimism in mind, I'll see you next week. So between now and then, stitch happy and stay safe.